I was fired. I was working at a company in 2020 and was let go 2 weeks before Christmas. It was terrible.
Today, I'm super excited to be here with Cassie Hansen. She's the owner at Red One Management. She's someone that started in arbitrage. She essentially has been able to grow an operation to more than 30 properties under management. She's an expert essentially in everything that has to do with homeowner acquisition. You decided, I'm not going to go back, I'm going to start my own thing.
I knew that it was one of those things that I couldn't go back, and I was really tired of somebody owning my time. Now, I work way more now than I ever did in corporate, but I work when I want to work.
So, how did you force yourself to still take action?
Do it scared. You may be scared, but do it anyways. I had fear, but I had different fear. I had fear of not trying anything.
What does being scrappy mean to you, and how do you think that can actually be an advantage in business?
I basically printed off business cards and I just said, I'm going to start a business and I don't know what it's going to be. And I don't really have any money, but that's okay. We're going to figure this out. And I just started going to networking groups and talking to people and see what their interest was. I did some real psycho, like ex-girlfriend shit is what I call it. I went to Airbnb and I would find the facades of houses that I thought I would want to manage, and I would reverse Google image search them.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and where we aim to bring together what we think are essentially operators, founders, entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders in this space, whom we want to learn from in terms of their experiences, their backgrounds, what they've learned, and maybe even some of the mistakes they might have made throughout their process so that we don't have to make those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I'm super excited to be here with Cassie Hansen. She's the owner at Red One Management. Super excited to have her on. She's someone that started in arbitrage. She essentially has been able to grow an operation to more than 30 properties under management. And she's an expert essentially in everything that has to do with homeowner acquisition. She's someone that has had to bootstrap her growth and her business. So that's something that I just wanted to say, Cassie, I appreciate from the conversations we've had up until now is how resourceful really you have had to be in terms of going out there and getting those homeowners and spreading the word and whatnot. So yeah, we're going to cover a bunch of interesting things, from doing sales as an introvert to how you can replicate yourself as you grow and scale, how having no money can actually be a good thing because it forces you to be resourceful. How even though you might be getting started, it's important not to be desperate. How you can leverage in-person events to get referrals. How being scrappy can be an asset, and how having lots of time can also be an asset as well. And also we're going to talk about the importance of setting the right expectations. So that's a little bit about what you can expect from this episode here. Before we dive in, Cassie, where are you taking the call from?
So I'm located in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. We have an international airport here, so it's a big travel hub.
Awesome. Thank you, by the way, for being here. We like to start here with a question regarding if you were to start all over again from your experience with what you know today, what, if anything, would you do differently? Or what advice would you give yourself if you're talking to the person that was just getting started in this short-term rental and vacation rental space?
The advice I would give my former self, whether it's in entrepreneurship, working in corporate life, starting a business, whatever it is be more confident. I was so down on myself because I didn't think that I had, the tools that I needed to. Everybody seemed like they had it all together. And it just didn't seem like I was up there with them. But what I realized as I grew a little bit more as that I did have the skills to be confident that I could throw behind what I was saying and lean in and say, I know that this is absolutely right. I know that, this is the truth, and I'm not going to shy away from it. I always go back to this one example. I'm met these pair of guys that did exactly what I do. And they just seemed like hot shots to me. I was like, oh wow, that's what I could be whenever when I grow up in this business. And then I realized that they had two guys running it and then a third assistant. And meanwhile, I was just a one person operation. And when it came to light that they were managing the same amount of properties that I was at the time, but I was doing it all by myself, it flipped a switch on me. And I knew that, oh, okay, just because somebody looks like, they're a heavy hitter doesn't mean that they always are. So there's a lot of BS out there, especially with this industry, because it did get a lot of traction online and everybody, kind of staged it as this get rich quick scheme, and it's not. It's truly a business. It's something that you have to work. You have to constantly like work those issues that you have like with any business. And as you grow, it has to transform. And if you're not transforming, then you're truly left behind. So yeah, if I could go back in time, I would have just, sprinkled some confidence on me and just know that, hey, you're on the right track and you'll get there.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that, by the way. And if we dig a little bit deeper here about the confidence component, do you think there's something you could have done earlier to start building that confidence, or do you think it was just a matter of letting time show you that you were doing the right thing, that you were getting the right feedback from the market and from the results that you were having? Or do you think there's a way you could have like fast tracked the attainment of confidence on your in your case?
Gosh, I mean, who's to say? Maybe I need to be knocked around a little bit before I honed in my messaging and honed in what I knew to be true.
Hmm.
I can't go back and say I'd want to change anything. I think for me, I learned by doing. That's why I'm a person that was never really good at school because I didn't want to sit there and listen to the thing. I wanted to do the thing. So maybe for me, that's exactly what I needed.
That's perfect. Now, there's people that will essentially listen too much to that fear or to that, let's say, lack of confidence, to the point that they just do nothing, right? In your case, you didn't,
Oof.
despite acknowledging now that you look back and you're like, I wish I was more confident, like you still did it. So what do you think allowed you to still push and take action despite having maybe the imposter syndrome that everyone has when they're starting a business? You're talking to
Yeah.
homeowners, you know about how much of an expert you are and how good care you'll take about their property. But when it's the first management contract you're taking on, then it's like, it's a little bit of an imposter syndrome that some people might feel. So how did you force yourself to still take action?
Yeah. Do it scared. I mean, I hear that, so often through my social media algorithms, you may be scared, but do it anyways. And it's the best advice I can give. I had fear, but I had different fear. Um, I had fear of not trying anything. I did not fear failing. In
Mm,
fact, I thought if only I could fail at something, it means I tried something new. And I set out to go and fail spectacularly. I told myself, it's just information, If I totally screw this up, it's just information. I'll go do something else. And yeah, of course I was scared. Like it was horrible. Like, asking for the sale, whenever it's your business, is totally different than asking for the sale for somebody else's business where you know that you have support. But asking for the sale and then carrying the weight of that on my own back um, was really important for me. Like when people invest money in real estate, it's often the biggest investment that they will make in their lifetime. And so I felt the weight of that really heavily because that also scared the crap out of me. So whenever I took on that responsibility of, hey, I'm managing this entity that is going to grow generational wealth for this person, It's going to allow them to retire. They're going to, pass it on to their kids, or they're going to help cash flow their current lives. That meant a lot to me. And I think that that particular fear catapulted me forward too, because I really wanted to do it right.
Mm. Love it. Love what you said, by the way, about like being more scared to not do anything or try anything than to fail, and just seeing failure as like an inevitable step in the process, right? Because there's going to be just things that happen, and as long as you continue, it's not a failure. It's just like a roadblock or whatever. Just like a s-
It's
you
just
know.
it's just information that you know about yourself. And we'll get into the networking and marketing part of this, but I go to a lot of networking events and I see it all the time. The observer, right? They're not business owners. Maybe they already have a full-time job, and they are observing other business owners, or if it's a real estate specific event, they're observing other investors of like, oh, I want to get into real estate investing, but I'm just not sure. So they'll go and they'll talk to people and they'll gather information. And I can see them from a mile away because I see them all the time. You've got paralysis by analysis. You're
Mm,
digging in and trying to make it perfect before you go and make that investment. And what has served me so well in business ownership is getting something 80% done and moving on. This is
mm,
why I was never good at
mhm,
school. They don't like that in school.
mhm,
They want you to
mhm,
do the whole thing. But for me, it's get 80% done and move on to the next thing, because there are so many things to do. And if you get bogged down in getting it perfect and getting every little detail right, you're screwed.
mm,
You're so
mm,
screwed. And whenever you've worked in corporate world and been in school, they teach you that, this has to be perfection. You have to get 100 on the test. Every grammatical error has to be fixed in the paper. We are so groomed that everything has to be perfection that it gets so hard to step into some kind of new reality like business ownership or like a new investment. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your research and do your homework and do your due diligence, but at some point you just gotta go. Just
mm.
go.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I can relate so much to what you're saying about school, being someone that has, ADHD. I could
Yeah.
never just sit still and listen and
It's
take
terrible.
notes. And it was
Yeah.
always like, yeah, just wanting to do the thing and learn and, put it in practice.
Mhm.
And I was like, what am I going to do with this information here? So yeah, no, I totally relate to what you're saying. And, and what you're saying about, get it, 80% of the way there and move on, I think also applies to decision making. If you get 80% of the
Mm,
information to take a decision, that's probably sufficient information to essentially run with it. And you do see a lot of people not taking action because of this. So very interesting. Now, Kaise, let's talk a little bit about how you went from the corporate world into entrepreneurship. Let's talk a little bit about that transition, because of course, corporate tends to follow that same kind of mindset in a way from school, as far as like, things have to be done a certain way, and it's structured, and it's like, yeah. So in your case, how did you break free from that?
oh, well, I was fired the
So you
best way possible. The I was working at a company in 2020 and was let go 2 weeks before Christmas. It was December of 2020.
Oh wow.
Um, can't get a job right before the holidays. I'd had like a vacation plan. It was terrible. It was terrible.
And then you decided, I'm not going to go back and try to find another job. I'm going to start my own thing. You were like,
Yeah,
this is
I
the time.
knew. I knew that it was one of those things that I couldn't go back, and I was really tired of somebody owning my time. Now, I work way more now than I ever did in corporate, but I work when I want to work.
Mhm,
And I'm not beholden to somebody's time 100% of the time. Like, oh, you have to be working during these hours. No, if I want to take a nap during the day and I have the ability to do so, I can. If I
Mm,
want to work at midnight because I can't sleep, I can,
mhm.
and I really appreciate that aspect of it. But, that transition time between corporate world and starting this, there's a lot of time in between where, I didn't have a regular paycheck. I went from making a really good salary and working in downtown Dallas in a pool office and a pool, house and everything. And what basically went down to nothing and really restructured my life. And then I started taking on odd jobs with my friends. We would go and travel, we would read books. I wrote several different business plans. And I recuperated from that time where I had in corporate because whenever I was fired, it really hurt my feelings. And I know that that sounds silly, but it rocked me to my core, and it pissed me off at times, and it made me sad at other times because it was a company I really cared about, and I really cared about the people that I was working with, and it just really came as a shock to me. So putting myself in a position where I didn't have to rely on that kind of paycheck anymore was really important to me. But in that transition time between corporate and business ownership was a lot of like scrappy stuff and a lot of like having fun and not making a lot of money and, taking like odd bartending jobs or pet sitting jobs. And I just kind of did whatever I had to. But um, it kind of gave me a jumping off point of like, "Hey, here's how we need to be scrappy when we're starting a business, so we have no money."
Right, and you've actually discovered that it it's a competitive advantage now that you've been able to grow the business to have that scrappy mentality. Tell us about
Mhm.
what that means to you. What does being scrappy mean to you, and how do you think that can actually be an advantage in business?
I think some people call it grit. Um, I like the word scrappy, but, whenever I began, I basically printed off business cards, and I just said, "Okay, I'm gonna start a business, and I don't know what it's gonna be, and I don't really have any money, but that's okay. We're gonna figure this out." And I just started going to networking groups and talking to people and see what their interest was in what I knew. And I just thought, okay, I'm gonna call myself a business consultant, and I'm gonna consult on different types of businesses, but mainly in real estate and particularly in short term rentals. And obviously, that was day 1, and it has transitioned a lot since then. And now I have this true property management company, that specializes in vacation rentals. So that the point of going and starting somewhere, even though I didn't know what I was doing, I think is part of that grit and part of that scrappiness because I really got to talk to people and figure out what do people need because I had my own arbitrage rentals, but whenever I talked to people, it was I could see the light go out in their eyes whenever I told them, "Here's all the things that I do, and here's my best practices, and here's the KPIs you need to look at with an investment." And it would just the light would go out in their eyes, and I'm like, you know, they don't care to be told how to do it. They just want me to do it. And so through that process of kind of getting that market feedback and getting in people's faces and finding out what people's needs are, I kind of sorted out what this business was going to shape up to be. And then once I figured out, okay, this is the lane I need to be in, it was, well, crap, how do I find like my specific niche? Everybody has a business idea, but until you connect your idea to your customers, you got nothing. And
Hmm.
so it was a lot of going out and talking to people and uh, just connecting with connectors, which sounds funny. But what I know now, years into this business, is my client doesn't go to networking events, but the person that knows my client goes to networking events. So loan officers, realtors, insurance folks, plumbers, electricians, handymen, all the trades as well. But I realized as soon as they met me, oh, yeah, I know somebody has an Airbnb. Let me connect you.
Mm.
So it's all about finding those connectors. But again, you got to push through the fear of like going into a room of 100 people, not knowing a single person and walking up, hi, I'm Casey. Hi, I'm Casey. And it's just, you get your elevator pitched down. Um, but, the other side of that scrappiness is also sitting at home. Okay, I don't have maybe I have a couple of events on my calendar, but I don't have any meetings on my calendar. I have no money in my bank account. I've got time, and time is such a valuable asset, but it's also very scary.
Mhm.
So, if you wake up in the morning, you have nothing on the calendar and tomorrow is gonna be the same and the day after that's gonna be the same, it can weigh down on you really heavily. And so I just thought, "Okay, how do I find these people?" And I'm like, I either create market share or I take market share. So, I was pretty good at creating market share because I could connect with people and be like, "Hey, here's how you can make this investment work for you. Let me throw some comps at your existing property," and I could get them to convert their rentals to short-term rentals.
Mhm.
Well, taking market share is taking existing business from your competitor, right? So I did some real psycho, like ex-girlfriend shit is what I call it. What I did is I went to Airbnb and I would find the facades of houses that I thought I would want to manage, and I would reverse Google image search them, so then I could go find the address to the house. And then I would go pull, like, the property information from, like, the county websites or, like, Zoom info or been verified or whatever. I would throw the address in there, and then I would figure out who the name of the property owner is, and then from the name, I could cross-reference addresses and things where I could pretty much figure out their phone number or email address. And then it's all cold calls and getting rejection. But I would have never thought of that if I had the money to pay for leads.
Mhm.
Like most, if you're in a business development role at a corporation, they, pay money for leads, but I didn't have money for leads. So I went out and I made my own. Now, getting rejected on cold calls is a fresh kind of hell, especially whenever it's your own business. But it was what was necessary at the time to start getting to know folks. And then what was so lovely after that is you really get on referral trains because whenever you do a good job for somebody, they want to refer you out to their friends.
Wow.
So I
That
hope that answers your question
definitely,
about
no,
scrappiness.
definitely. Let me try to, yeah, let me talk about a few things that you just mentioned there. So, first of all, Airbnb doesn't give you, like a clear idea of where the properties are. It's kind of like a big radius there. So you had to do a lot of
Terrible.
I'm sure you had to do a lot of like walking around Google Street to find the actual property. That's impressive. Do you still do that to this day? Like, is that an approach that continues to allow you to connect with owners, or now it's more the referrals that you've built and
Yeah,
continue
it's
to do
more
that?
referral based. I have done it before, but then I had the time to do it kind of in math. Like I would pick 10 properties at a time. Anything more, I would get bogged down in one of the steps because it's several steps. And so I'd pick 10, facades that I would research and then I would bring them all to the next step and then all to the next step. It's just kind of how my workflow happened. But yeah, I don't have time to do that now, but I'm not against it because it was effective. And then
Yeah.
people would just be like, how did you get my phone number?" They're like, I'm just so curious." And I'm like, "Listen, you don't wanna hear about how I've stalked you for the past few days." But I'll
Oh,
tell you
that's
but
hilarious.
whenever I whenever I would say, "Oh, I stalked you like a crazy ex-girlfriend," I kinda keyed that phrase because I would get a laugh every time. On a
Of
cold
course.
call to get a laugh from somebody, unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, you
It
won.
just doesn't happen. Everybody's annoyed with you. So if I could get a laugh out of somebody, then usually I could kinda get them to warm up to me.
Yeah, and just for someone that's listening is like, oh, I'm gonna give this a try. I'm still stuck at the how do you identify the facade stage? Like you just walk around, in Google Streets and just like go property by property. Like did you come up with some kind of technique on how to narrow it down further once you had the radius that Airbnb provides? Um because I get how you can come up with the listings on Airbnb, and then once you have the facade and the address, kind of extract the information, of who's the owner, and then kind of find a contact detail. But the part about finding the property is the difficult part, again, because Airbnb just gives you the radius. Any tips
Yeah.
about how you went about that part? Any
I think you're making it more difficult than it actually is. Like, I would just put in, if I wanted city of Dallas, I'd just throw in the whole city of Dallas, you know? And if I wanted the Bishop Arts District, a lot of times people list out Bishop Arts District in their title or in the copy of the listing. So a lot of times people will share information about like which neighborhood it is. They just don't want to share the exact location, which is understandable.
Okay, so you based yourself also on whatever extra information was in there. Makes sense. Now, moving on. One of the things you mentioned too is your calendar is empty, and it's like really on you to go and create something, to go and do something and build something. So, of course, that can be crushing in terms of the pressure of like, okay, what am I gonna do? And nothing's coming at you. No meetings, no leads, no nothing. You got to go and find it. Um, One of the things you mentioned you did early on was you put it together and advertised a show, which ended up becoming kind of like a recurring approach for you to then invite referral partners and whatnot. Tell us a little bit about that story, which it again is just another example of how being resourceful, being scrappy, not having resources, having to come up with something can end up resulting in something quite useful. Tell us a bit about that show that you advertised where six people ended up showing up.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so funny because I forget all the things that I did in the beginning. But at first, I just thought, people have so many questions about what I do. Why don't I create what I call the master class that is free? And I just advertise it free master class. I'll let you know everything there is to know about Airbnb. Um, and it was the only thing I had going on at the time. I had zero clients. And, so I advertised this thing all over my social media, and I am not a social media gal. In fact, my, like, Facebook profile was, like, paused at the time. I had to reactivate it so that I could, like, put out the word about this free class that I was doing. Um, so I put it on social media. I emailed it out to, like, every person I had met at a networking event thus far, which, like, wasn't a lot, but, like, a little stack of business cards. And then, I partnered up with a local coffee shop, to have it there. And so I physically printed out full color flyers and posted them at the surrounding businesses around the coffee shop, and then in just neighborhoods that I thought, "Maybe these people have money, I don't know." But I advertised the hell out of this thing, and you're right, only, like, 6 people showed up, and, like, one of them was my friend. My best friend at the time, and she invited somebody else. So it was really the only people that came was like people that knew me or it was word of mouth. So in that class, I just taught them everything I knew, just word vomit. Here's everything I know about how to run an Airbnb. And what I realized at the end of that class is something I said earlier is that their eyes started to be glossy, and I lost the light behind them because it was just so overwhelming that they were like, "Well, can you just do this for me?" And the answer was, "Well, yeah, of course I can." So out of that class, I got my first 2 clients, and then that same week, I had a referral for a client from a networking group. So in 1 week, I had my first 3 clients, and I just whew, felt like I was on top of the world, man. Like it was everything. And what I didn't realize at the time, but was really smart, is that I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna create value by giving away free information. That's what I thought I was doing. But what I was actually doing is I gave myself a platform to sell myself for an hour and a half. I didn't but I didn't know that at the time. When I look back, I'm like, "Oh, I basically sold, uh, myself as far as, like, my knowledge, my ability, all of that, to these investors." And what came out of it was 2 clients that are like, "Oh, this girl knows what she's talking about. I trust her."
Mm.
And it got the ball rolling.
Yeah, yeah, and so from there you understood that perhaps, like you were saying earlier, your clients, the actual owners, perhaps are not the ones that are more likely to go to this networking event. So you
Mhm.
you transition into like, okay, let's get the loan officers, let's get the realtors, let's get the brokers, whatever that might be. um, what has worked for you in terms of those referral partnerships, building them, maintaining them? One thing is to just tell a broker that you are in the property management business. Another thing is that they actually care about you, or what you do, enough to send you a business, send you some referral. And even if they do it once, how do you stay top of mind to make sure that if they have someone else, then they want to think of you and send it to you? What have you learned about what it takes to build a true referral partnership system?
That's a very good question, and it has been hard earned to get this information. But 1, I approach it as relationship marketing. I don't go to a networking event to sell. I never go to sell. I go to create relationships. And what happens in relationships that are healthy is reciprocity. So I want to have what I would call a giver's gain mentality, right? So if I meet somebody that I can pass business to, that's the best qualifier for them to give me business. Now, I can't pass business to every single person that I meet, of course. But if I approach a new individual and I say, I want to create a relationship with this person versus I want to sell myself, uh, it creates an openness to receive what I do have to sell. Because if somebody's coming up, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. Somebody's called you or shown up in front of your face trying to hard sell you on something. It doesn't matter if they're selling you the greatest thing in the world. You don't want anything to do with it. So it's about creating trust and relationships in your community. So it I always see like kind of the same types of trades everywhere I go. A lot of insurance people, a lot of loan officers. But the successful ones are the ones that are just around, you know? They're just around, they're having a beer, they're kicking back with everybody. They've just made friends. And before you know it, they're getting business. Even though there's like a million insurance people out there, they're getting business just because, oh, I like talking to him or her. Oh, they're pretty cool. They're nice to have a beer with. And whenever you approach networking like that, one, you set expectations for yourself. Because if you walk away from a networking event, I'm not going to get any business out of that. Well, it's a real Debbie Downer. Like you will burn out so fast. And number 2, you're a more palatable person to be around, and you never know the butterfly effect that you're going to have after you meet people. And there are some people where I meet, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm definitely getting business out of them." They ghost, I never hear from them again. And then there's other people that I would have never guessed that have given me literally life-changing referrals. Life-changing because they referred me to one person, referred me to another person, referred me to another person. And before you know, I'm on a 4, 5, 6 referral train that I would have never gotten had I not just met one person at an event who I thought could offer me nothing.
Hmm.
So being around is really important. Being engaged with your community is really important. You kind of mentioned it earlier that, I'm naturally more of an introverted person. Like going and networking is not fun for me. It is super draining. Um, but I found that if I go often enough, it's not quite as bad. It's like a muscle. Uh, and it's really good to be talking about your business all the time. Like, whenever I'm out of practice, I have a tendency to not get to the point quickly. But whenever I'm practicing talking about my business all the time, I've got an elevator pitch of, whenever I meet somebody and I can quickly connect with them and quickly tell them what I do without seeing the light go out behind their eyes. It's funny, I talk about that a lot, but in sales, you really have to pay attention and be queued up to what people are interested in. Somebody's leaning forward and they're really interested in what you're saying. Okay, maybe you can expound a little bit more. But if they're kind of starting to back off and be like, oh, yeah, that's cool, just stop, you know, because they're not going to be listening to you anyways. Nobody wants to listen to you drone on and on, unless you're on a podcast, maybe.
Yeah, but tell me, like, as an introvert, what's unique about the way you've had to approach this? Because some people think that sales is for extroverts. You're the example that you can still succeed in this, and despite being an introvert. Is there something that has worked for you? I don't know. Do you have to pump yourself up, before going to these events and look at yourself in the mirror or something, or some kind of meditation? Like, I don't know. Like, what
Yeah.
what is it? Because you talk about these things like, oh, look at their body language. So maybe because you're introvert, you pay more attention to this subtle signs or whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, what has it been for you that has allowed you to not see this as a reason for you not to go to these events, or a reason why you cannot
Yeah.
succeed at this sales game in terms of homeowner acquisition?
I think a lot of practice, doing it scared, and honing in on what your systematic approach is. Um, Instead of selling myself, whenever I meet a brand new human, I work on connecting with them. So I have gained the ability through experience to connect with people quickly. Um, Whenever I meet somebody, it's not like, you can just be like, "Oh, hey, those are some nice shoes." And, it's like not like trying to work, and then it's not like you're gonna connect with them, right? So, I kind of adjust my approach all the time, with what that connection looks like. But something that I've done recently is, like, when you meet somebody new, whether you're at a dinner party for, like, socially, or at a networking event, people will be like, "Oh, so what do you do?" Right? That's kind of, "Oh, what's your name? What do you do?" Um, so I've kind of adjusted that approach a little bit, and I'm like, "Hey, like, what are you into right now? Like, what's something you're passionate about right now?" Um, or like, what's a project that you're working on right now? And you'll see people's eyes light up of like, "Oh, I'm really into, insert whatever weird thing that they're going to talk about that has nothing to do with work." And a lot of times, like, whenever they're able to kind of share something personal about them, one, it helps make them memorable to you. Oh, you're the person that's into weird Renaissance paintings, or, you're the person that loves pickleball, like everybody, I guess, right now. But um, it helps kind of give you an anchor for the conversation that is not work related. And that served me well because I don't remember names really easily, actually, ever. And so I'll meet people and I'm like, "Hey, you're the person that likes pickleball." But I'll remember that weird thing that they told me about that was personal to them, because what we know about learning in general is that, whenever you and I sat in school and have the same hard time learning, is that you're not going to remember the facts. You're not going to remember the dates. What you remember are stories, and your story is everything. So if you yourself have a story to tell, you become more memorable. And if you can have people share their stories with you, it's a way of connection. It's a way for them to feel good about themselves too, and your likability goes way up.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting because it serves multiple purposes, right? You are now ingraining that memory in your head, so you'll remember that. about them. So it's like a personal database you're creating with stories. You're connecting with the person as well. You're increasing your likability, like you said. That's so interesting. Makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned earlier that part of it was just setting the expectation for yourself of knowing that you would go in and not having the mindset of what am I going to get out of this event, but who can I add value to, or who can I connect with, whatever. And that was an
Mhm.
expectation you were setting with yourself. You've also mentioned to me that you consider yourself to be a professional expectation setter, that's one of the most important things you do in your role. Tell us a little bit about why that is important, and how you've gone about setting those expectations, from the owner side of things, from the guest side of things, and how has that evolved with time as well. Maybe the way you were setting expectations before is different than the way you're doing it now. Tell us a bit about that concept of being a professional expectation setter.
I learned the lesson of setting expectations very early on because it screwed me in the beginning. Um, I am a storyteller, like I mentioned. Whenever I first started, that one of my first clients that came out of that class came to me and said, "Hey, I have this property. I want to make 4,000 a month off of it, and I want you to manage it." And I said, "Okay, I will do that." And that property was not capable of making $4,000 a month. It was in a very rural area, but I told him, "Well, I'll see what I can do about it." And uh, it ended up being a contentious relationship later on because he said, "Well, you said I can make $4,000 off of this property a month, and you are not delivering." And that wasn't true. And he didn't know that because he had never been in that space before. And I didn't know to say that, um, mainly because I was scared and I didn't want to lose my very first client. So I just agreed to everything. And that was a mistake. So from that first client on, I've set very realistic expectations with owners. This is a business. There's going to be ebbs and flows with it. There are times where you're going to have to add cash in because it's February and February sucks for travel season. There are times where you're going to be flush with cash in July because that's whenever our best month is. And you need to understand what to do with that cash to potentially float you. So being upfront and saying, "Hey, here's what I think that this property can make. Here's my professional opinion." And whenever I throw those numbers together, I'm sure to not inflate them because I know that I'm going to be held to them. So if I say, "Yeah, I think this property can make 4,000 a month," go back to your expenses, make sure that that works for you. Well, whenever we make 5,000 a month, well, then they're going to be super pleased, right? But if they can make it work at my conservative estimate, then they can make it work in the flush month, of course, right? Because the internet has created this get rich quick mentality with short term rentals, so many investors go into it and just be like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to, make all the money and, you know, not have any problems and it's going to be great. And if you can't do that for me, then you're doing your job wrong." And that's just not the way it is. And I hear all the time, specifically with the narrative of traveling nurses. I have people come to me all the time. "Hey, I want to rent out my property for $6,000 a month to traveling nurses and professionals, like executives." Okay, well, I don't give a crap what somebody does for work. As long as the money's green, we're going to take them, right? So, this narrative of like, "Oh, I want executives in corporate housing and I want the traveling nurses," it's all BS. You know, we're all looking at the same pool of renters. It doesn't matter what their job is or, what their vocation is or how high they are up on the executive scale. We're going to rent it out for what the market says it can rent it out for. So whenever I hear that narrative, which I've heard as early or as recent as last week, I have a new investor where she shared the same thing with me, and I just let her know, "Hey, that's kind of been this narrative that's been pushed out, and, it's okay, we do accept that type of renter, but we also take all types of renters." So and she quickly understood that, we moved on from it, but, like, man, I hear it once a week at least.
Yeah, no, I can see how that becomes super important. In terms of setting expectations. um there's also, I think, the idea of like owners wanting to make money. They're like, oh, my goal is to maximize the revenue potential of this property. I want to make the most out of it as an investment. And then they come in and they set you an unreasonable minimum rate that puts you out of the market, that doesn't allow you to rent, because you're not competitive. How have you approached that in terms of the expectation setting? Is that something you'll kind of like, be open to and say, yeah, okay, well, I can give you a minimum rate recommendation, and you still, get their approval for that new minimum rate? Or is that something that, we've heard people that literally tell owners, no, if you work with me, like, I'm the one who sets the rates, and if you don't like it, then we're not the right fit for you. How have you approached expectation settings when it comes to that?
Mm. Asking for somebody's goals from day 1 is essential, right? So, I'll have some folks come and say, "Hey, I don't need to cash flow this. I just need to pay expenses because I wanna make this an equity play. I plan to hang on to this property 15, 20 years, or I'm gonna pass this down to my children. I just want it to pay for itself for the most part." Okay, great. We can meet that expectation, right? Sometimes the goal is, I want to cash flow this. I have a really low mortgage with a really low interest rate. I've got a lot of equity already in the property. And I just want to cash flow this to fund another project. Here's my minimum ask. Okay. So finding out somebody's goals from the beginning is really helpful. Now, to answer your question about pricing, I kind of fall somewhere in between. I'm not so black and white of like, you have to listen to my pricing strategy, and I'm not going to fall all the way in the camp of we have to do it with your pricing strategy. Because a lot of owners, they'll come and say, "Hey, I think I have an idea of what I think it should be." But whenever I run comps on a property to tell them how much I think it will rent for, it's coming up with that bottoms up approach. And I already have the pricing in mind that I want to start at. Part of that setting expectations too is letting them know that, like, hey, we're not married to a pricing strategy. We're married to what the market has to tell us. So I did comps for a 5-bedroom house in Denton, Texas one time. And there wasn't very many 5-bedroom houses, mainly 4-bedroom. And so I priced it a little bit higher than the 4 bedrooms, and we went live. I got 4 bookings in the first day, and I'm like, "Well, that's a lot of bookings," but I'm like, "Okay, fine." The next day, I got another couple of bookings in the morning, and I thought, "Okay, I'm priced too low," because we already got the first 3 bookings on Airbnb with that 20% off, right? So that usually, like, that kind of accounts for the first 3, those come in pretty quickly. But I kept getting more, so I raised my rates by, like, $20. And then the bookings just kept rolling in. The next day, I increased rates again. The next day, I increased rates again. I did 4 times. And then I started to get, like, 1, 2 bookings a day, which is kind of what I was more comfortable with, and then I could get a full calendar with. So, I use that as an example, and it goes the opposite way too. Sometimes we're priced too high, and it's like, well, crap, like I should be getting more activity on this already. So don't be married to a pricing strategy. You fluctuate. But part of that goal setting is, I've had people come to me and say, I want a price like this. I've got a badass house in a really nice neighborhood, and I don't want to just rent it all the time. In fact, I would like it to sit vacant, or I want it rented at this high rate. And I said, okay, let's do it. And guess what? Like with that house, I probably get maybe 2 bookings a month as a short term rental. But those 2 bookings make me enough money for the month on that property that it's fine, you know? And the owner's happy, and I'm happy, and so it's all gravy. It just really depends
Mhm.
on the owner and, your kind of flexibility. My thing with owners is I stay extremely pliable. Uh, Whenever you have an investment property, like you just are worried about every little thing, or at least most people are. Not everybody is. But, they just have a lot of concerns and a lot of worries, and, like, I will just listen to their worries and be like, "Hey, here's how we're gonna combat this. Let's give this a little more time. Let's reconnect on this date," set a timeline with it, and I'm in that game right now with a particular property. It's just not getting booked, and the reality is that it's too saturated in this particular area. And, there's a lot of empty houses in the area. And so we can continue to drop rate, but I'm only gonna drop it, so far, and it's just still not getting booked. So, I've set a timeline with the owner, "Hey, we're gonna change this, we're gonna give it 2 weeks, and then we're gonna revisit." And we revisited, not a lot more booking. So we changed our strategy again. Let's revisit. And I think whenever you kind of have that timeline played out of here's what we think is going to work, and if it's not working, let's try something else. I think the owners, they're not gonna sit back and be like, "Well, you haven't done anything. This is all your fault." Well, no, actually, we've been, hand in hand every step of the way, and now whenever it comes time for the decision of, "Do I need to sell this property? Do I need to convert to a long-term rental?" It's not because we didn't give it all we had. And sometimes that's the answer, "Hey, we gotta sell the property," and that's okay.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So it's also showing them the work that's being done in the back, because sometimes owners don't have, an idea of how much goes behind the scenes. They think, oh, just put it up there and rent it, and that's it. Like they don't know that there's
Mm.
inspections, and that there's comp sets, and that there's, you looking at increasing or decreasing the rates, and the 24/7 guest comes. And yeah, I think that's a very good point in terms of not just making the change when you're seeing a problem, but making the change and telling the owner about the change as well, giving yourself a little timeline to review what's happened. That way, yeah, the
Mhm.
owner feels involved in the decision making. They feel involved in the efforts that you guys are mutually going through to try to turn the situation around. That's super important. And then to circle back, just because we're super passionate about pricing strategy here. You mentioned how, even if you took the time to do a perfect competitive set, you still ended up seeing, okay, we were getting too many bookings too fast, let's increase that rate, right? I think that's something that owners sometimes don't get, that is super important. Is like, you can have the perfect competitive set, right? First of all, if you obsess too much over your competitive set, you're going to narrow it down so much that you won't really see any kind of fluctuation between, like what's cheap and what's expensive in terms of, percentiles. And we're getting a little technical here, but basically, if your comp set is just two properties, I mean, you won't really be able to see, okay, how to position yourself on the low end or the high end of that comp set, because you've narrowed it down to just two properties. Number one. Number two, you don't really know when you're looking at a comp set, especially with tools that use scraping methods to look at their data. You don't know if they're actually occupied, or if the occupancy that you're seeing on the tool is just blocks on the calendar, or owner blocks, maintenance blocks, preparation time, whatever that might be. So, not, I guess what I'm trying to say is not obsessing too much over those comp sets, but to your point, obsessing about the market and monitoring the market and what the market dictates. And just, yeah, I just think it's more important to be fast at reacting when it comes to pricing, that it is to have the perfect comp
Mm,
set, from the get-go.
that's
So
right.
that was just, something I wanted to
That's
add.
that's that 80/20 rule again. Get it 80% right and throw that shit online. Like, throw it up and see how people are reacting to it.
Mhm.
That's your best data set right there. And, I don't like to use, like, the tools that are up online for comps right now. I like to do, because the scraping method, you're right, takes into account all properties. The properties that are priced too high that never get booked, the properties that are priced too low and like are slumlords, and then it includes properties that are online, but their whole calendar is blocked off, but they're just online, right? So it's not a healthy data set. So what I do for comps is I go in and I look at each individual comp and say, okay, this is the right amount of guests, bedrooms, bathrooms, whatever. Um, but this is an established property. They've got, plenty of reviews. Now, they don't have to be the best reviews, right? But they just need to have a lot of reviews to show that, okay, they know what's going on. They're getting booked
Mhm.
pretty regularly. They kind of worked out their pricing strategy. And then I'm also looking at, are they actually booked? I'm not going to pull a comp for somebody that's priced at $1,500 a night on a Tuesday night if they have zero bookings in their calendar for the next 2 weeks, the next few months. Because in my mind, that's what it's about. Are the next few weeks booked? Are the next 2 months kind of booked? You know, Unless you're going into January and February, which that kind of skews things. But the next 2 weeks should be pretty much booked, and the next 2 months should have a peppered calendar to where it looks like, okay, when they go down the line, they'll probably get bookings.
Yeah, and that's what also owners don't understand. They're like, "Oh, I saw my neighbor, rented for this much." She's like, "No, he didn't rent. He's just advertising at that price point. Doesn't mean he's gonna ever get booked at that price point." And yeah, I love what you said about finding the comps, more manually as well. Yeah, looking at reviews, looking at when was the last review. That's something I see a lot of people not doing. Is like, if the last review was 1 year ago, then it's probably not an active rental. You probably don't want to include that in your comp. So anyway, there's a lot that we could cover there.
That's
I,
a
I
good
want to
point.
touch on one more thing there, which you
Mhm.
mentioned is the name of the game for you in terms of growth is replicating yourself. You said that that's one of the things you've done
Mm,
successfully. So
mhm.
tell us about that. How do you replicate yourself? What are some areas, functions, roles where you've been able to successfully do so, and others where you're still kind of in the process of figuring it out? And what have you learned about what it takes to successfully do it? Because to your point earlier, a lot of people sell the dream of like, this business is going to run itself and just hire a VA, and then you can just sip some margaritas by the beach, in the Caribbean. But clearly it's not the case. It is a business. It has to run. Yet you can still delegate certain things, you can still automate certain things, you can still put some infrastructure in place. But what's different between the idealistic way that some people present this as, like, this is going to run itself, versus the practicality of like replicating yourself to some degree based on your experience?
Yeah. I think you bring up two important things is like, how do you replicate yourself? And how do you do it with integrity? A lot of people, whenever I first started, I struggled because you're on call 24/7 in this business. I mean, you could be at the gynecologist, you could be sitting in front of your kids on Christmas Day, you could be at, dinner with your family. It doesn't matter. If a guest wants something, like you have to just say how freaking high, especially if there's entry issues or whatever. So I really struggled with that at first. I also struggled with talking to all the cleaners all the time. Um, Cleaners, scheduling issues, quality issues. It was just all so much communication. And so I asked myself, okay, how do I because I can do all of this when I'm at 5 or 6 properties, but once I start to scale, is how do I replicate myself in a way that holds on to the integrity of the business and how I would do things? And the answer is like you have to let go of some things and you have to allow the people that you employ to make mistakes. And I've seen it. I've seen people that I've hired and I'm like, oh, they're about to screw this up. And I just let them. I let them screw it up and they'll figure it out, and they'll be upset by it at first, but then they'll figure out and then they won't do it again. But if I tell them, hey, don't screw this up, got to do everything perfectly, not only do I become a micromanager, but a lot of people don't like to be managed that way, and it's a very unhappy working environment. But the other side of the integrity piece is, yeah, a lot of people do go the VA route, right? It's always been so incremental to me to be sure that I have somebody local answering messages and taking guest phone calls. And that has been from day one with me. It's like if somebody calls and says, "Hey, what's a good steakhouse in Dallas?" I want somebody to be like, "Oh, you know what? I've tried this place. This place is okay." Having like too much automation or having somebody answer the phone that doesn't live in our, you know, general vicinity is really tough because it creates an experience to the guests that isn't what they signed up for. When they come to Airbnb, they want to know that somebody local is there on the other end to be like, "Oh, here's my favorite taco place," or like, "Here's where I go get my hair done," or whatever. And so replicating myself has been hard because I do wear so many different hats, but assigning one person one or two of my own hats and saying, okay, here are the tasks that I can delegate. And really, at first, here are the tasks that I absolutely cannot stand. I have to get these off my plate. And for me, it was talking to cleaners. It was the one thing that I was just like, I just can't take this anymore. So I hired a cleaning manager that helped, that with the communication, they took in all the pictures, we figured out damages. So now I have one point of contact instead of 50 points of contact, right? Um, so growing and replicating yourself and delegating is a huge part of growing any business, right? But growing it with the integrity that you want the business to hold is really the key piece. And how you do that is with slow growth. Fast growth, while it looks appealing to all of us, investor comes to you, "Hey, I want to give you 30 properties." Oh my gosh, that would be life changing, right? But you screw it up. You're not qualified to go from 10 properties to 40 properties at that time. You don't have the processes in place. So slow growth is good growth and it's sustainable. You can take on, one, two, five properties at a time. And you kind of shuck and jive and you kind of figure out what's working and what's not. You change up your processes and you don't let stuff fall through the cracks. And that's something I have to really remind myself of all the time is because I push myself a lot and I get down on myself. "Ugh, I should have more properties. I should be bigger. I've been doing this long enough to where I should have gotten more stuff under my belt." But then I remind myself, no, slow growth is sustainable growth.
Mm.
I know on this day, I'm not going to drop the ball. I'm just not because I've already got everything in place to where it's not a single point of failure. I won't drop the ball. If somebody handed me 100 properties tomorrow, I would 100% drop the ball.
Mhm.
And now my brand, Red One Management, is everything. I've protected that brand a lot. We have a really good standing in our community. We don't have any haters out there. And, whenever it comes to property management and with hospitality, those are two polarizing industries where people can get really upset really fast. And I'm very proud of the way that we've handled issues in the past. And we take care of our guests, we take care of our property owners, even if it means we come out of pocket. Hey, I'm going to come out of pocket to protect this brand because that's way more important to me than this, little bill that came up that somebody's upset about.
Wow. Wow. I love that. I love that. That's awesome. And yeah, so one of the things I'm super passionate about is this idea of, trying to make sure that you survive, right? That you survive. Like to your point, so many people are focused on growth, growth, growth. And this idea comes from a book I reference a lot in the podcast here, Anti-Fragile, which is a book that says that the opposite of something fragile is not just something robust or solid or resilient. It's something that actually gets better, because of the chaos,
Mm,
because of the volatility,
mhm.
because of whatever it might be. And so the book just makes the point that the business world is too focused on growth, um, to the expense of focusing on survival. And that at the end of the day, if you just focus on not losing long term, you'll win, right? Versus just trying to take more than you can chew on too fast,
Yeah.
and then you end up
Yeah.
dropping the ball. And then, yeah, great, you had 2 quarters, 3 quarters of amazing growth, but then you went out of business. So how is that better than having grown a little slower, but still be around in 5, 10 years? So super super passionate with what you're saying. Yeah, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, so retention is a huge deal, right? Like you want to, yes, you took all this time and money to gain a client, but how do you, how do you maintain that client? And it kind of brings up a point that has not been popular in my business, which is I don't hold my property managers to a time bound contract. I don't say, hey, you have to stick with me for a 90-day trial period or you have to sign a year contract with me. I stay super, super flexible, super malleable with these owners because that's what they need. And it actually makes people feel quite a bit safer to know that they can get out of the contract if something goes awry at any time. So I do have a 30-day separation notice just because we do a lot of advertising, right? And it takes a lot of time to pull all that stuff down and to detach bank accounts and all the things, right? But the reason why I it has not been popular is people have always come to me and said, how are you gonna stop your clients when they want to leave you? Well, the answer is if you need to sell a property, go sell a property. Like I'm you're not gonna be beholden to me. What am I gonna go after somebody for ending a contract 3 months early? No, no. So that kind of like flexibility has given me the ability to retain the people that I've brought on. And for that reason, I really don't lose clients. You know, Unless somebody has a circumstance, hey, we're having a baby, I have to move back into the home, or I've been traveling for 3 years. I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna stay there for 6 months, and then I'm gonna go again. Whatever it is, like we stay flexible with people, and I think that they really appreciate that. And it helps that retention.
Yeah, retention is everything in this space. I mean, when you look at the lifetime value of a management contract and you play
Mm,
around with the variables of like how long an average owner stays with you on your management program, if you just increase the number of months that they stay with you on average, uh, the impact that has on the lifetime value of that contract, and that it is then translated into how much you can now actually spend to acquire a new contract. Because if a contract just represents more in lifetime value, then that just means that you can go out and spend more in advertising. Because contrary to, so like, you could have the same property, charge the same commission, right? Deliver the same service, the same cost structure, the same cost of delivering the service. And all you have is a better service in terms of the owner relations or whatever that increases retention. And you could literally be in a position where you can spend twice as much as your competitor in how much you can pay to get a lead, once you're at a
mhm,
point where you can afford paying for leads. Of course, if you
sure.
if you're just starting out, just go on Airbnb and follow the steps that we discussed earlier. And that is literally, it can be double as much that you can spend to acquire a contract. So I just think that I agree with you. People don't talk enough about retention. And also, there's a simple formula too, like how many properties are you adding, versus how many properties you are losing, right? And if you take one and divide by the other one, it's going to give you your business capacity in terms of how big of an operation you can have. Unless you start adding more properties at a faster pace, or you decrease your churn, you're never going to exceed that theoretical maximum size of a portfolio that you can get. And people just don't think about it. So anyway, I think what you said is so true, and we need to talk about it more. um, Casey, I could keep you here for hours. It's been great. I've taken a lot of notes. I literally could keep you here for hours. Believe me. I think we would have more things to talk about as well. This has been great. This has been super insightful. Thank you so much for the insights. Thank you so much for the lessons. Truly, truly, inspiring. In terms of how you just managed to, it's the idea of going from zero to one. Zero to one, literally, like from nothing to something. And I think that's why entrepreneurship is so powerful. And so yeah, just keep it up. Great stuff. Love what you're up to. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks so much for all the insights. Where can people connect? Where can people maybe find out about some of those masterminds you do, or just reach out if they want to learn more?
Yeah, they can check out my website at red1management.com. That's Red One Management, all spelled out. Um, they can also look me up on Instagram, Facebook, all under Red One Management handles. But definitely the website is gonna have the links to everything. But if any folks have a question, I actually have a contact form on my website that you can reach out and it'll send it directly to my email. And a lot of folks come with like these, questions that I feel like um are things that are just known because I do them all of the time, and you forget all like the little things that you do to figure out the algorithm, or like how to stage things, or the best type of coffee maker to have, all of these like little details that go into making this business run. And yeah, I love being able to help out with those little questions, big or small.
Love it. Thanks so much. This was amazing. Have a great one, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.